What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you each and every Monday and Thursday by the Hockey News. I am your host, Emma Lingan, and I cover the Nashville Predators here at the Hockey News. I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Michael Augello, who covers the Buffalo Sabres here for us at the Hockey News, and got lots to talk about beyond those two teams today. But before we do dive into today's bite-sized storylines from around the NHL, do want to let you know that we are brought to you by our good friends at Sticks.com. Hey, hockey players, why drop a fortune on your sticks when you can snag pro-level composite sticks at Sticks.com? That's Stix.com. These all black beauties are made for sniping, saucing, and shutting it down, all while looking sharp on the ice. And the best part, prices start at just $85.13 US for a 3-pack. Yep, you heard that right. Elite sticks without the elite price. Hit up Sticks.com. Again, that's Stix.com now and gear up without the markup. Let's go, Michael. Rough news for the Edmonton Oilers this week. We're going to start there. Mattias Ekholm, defenseman, sustained an injury in their win over the Sharks on Friday, but it's looking like he could potentially be out for the rest of the season into the playoffs as well. How much do you think this loss is going to impact the Oilers' hopes for going on any kind of a deep playoff run here?
Well, Emma, as you know, since he had a lengthy part of his career in Nashville, he's a very valuable defenseman. He's the type of guy that really rises to the occasion in the playoffs. He can contribute offensively, but defensively, he is a very solid veteran blue liner. And, the loss. Now, Elliot Friedman on Saturday said it could be season ending, that there was going to be a second opinion. Chris Knobloch, the Oilers coach, came out this morning and said that he is out for the first round for sure, and then they'll reevaluate. If they get him back, you can imagine he's probably going to be at less than 100%. And that defense, we know that is the Achilles heel of the Edmonton Oilers. The goaltending has been an issue, but the defense, they have three, I would say, good defensemen in Evan Bouchard, Darnell Nurse, and Ekholm. They, in the playoffs, usually play high 20 minutes, 25, 26 minutes a night. The remainder of their defense is, I think, borderline NHL caliber. Kulak is okay. But with the loss of Ekholm, it's going to be a tougher challenge for the Oilers, who, if they do not get home ice advantage against the LA Kings, I think it's a pick'em series now. And LA, with their ability to win at home, if they do get home ice advantage, I think the Oilers are in deep trouble, not only because of Ekholm, but all the other injuries that they have.
Yeah, you said it. I watched Ekholm for a number of years here in Nashville, and he is so valuable. I can certainly attest to the fact that the Predators miss him back there, but he is definitely just a top caliber defenseman. Like you said, can contribute offensively, but especially for a team like the Oilers, they don't necessarily need him to. They need him to do his job and play defense, and that is going to be a huge loss for them. Speaking of huge losses, the Winnipeg Jets, they did clinch the President's Trophy on Sunday. However, they lost a key piece of their own roster over the weekend. So Nikolaj Ehlers collided with an official. So head coach Scott Arniel said that Ehlers, upon that collision, had re-aggravated a previous injury. Still don't have a known return timeline for him. But considering how important Ehlers is to this Jets offense, how do you think this is going to impact their playoff hopes? Obviously they're in the playoffs, but their hopes of advancing on a deep run here if he is out long term.
The way I look at it, they're a very deep team. They have a lot of players who have scored in double figures in goals. I think they can get through the first round without Ehlers. It's a question of then facing whoever comes out of that titanic struggle between Dallas and Colorado, whether they can beat that team. And I have serious doubts. I mean, he's a valuable player. He's been a pretty consistent player with 63 points this season. I believe he's fourth on the Jets in goals. They need that offense. I mean, they're not a dynamic offensive team. They rely on team defense and Hellebuck, but they need goal scoring, and Ehlers on the power play and 5-on-5 is somebody that they definitely will need if they want to make a deep run.
Yeah, Ehlers, unfortunately, is a guy who has had his share of injuries. He has a hard time staying healthy, especially around this time of year. You know, he missed the playoffs and the Jets' first round losses to Vegas in 2023 and then St. Louis in 2019. He plays a big role on their top power play unit and on their second line. You know, he, as you mentioned, having one of the best statistical seasons of his career. So really, I think where they are going to miss him the most is on that top power play unit, because that is where he has been most effective for them. So still waiting for an official word on how long, how severe this injury is, how long he'll be out. But certainly the Jets are hoping for the best there. All right, let's head over to Minnesota, because Michael, we talked about this before numerous times on the show, that the Wild now officially have signed Zeev Buium to an entry-level contract. He's 19 years old. He was Minnesota's 12th overall pick last year. He had 48 points in 41 games with the University of Denver this past season. This is a really exciting young defensive prospect. And now that they officially have him signed, what do you think this does in terms of sort of a facelift for the Wild defense now that they've got Buium and Brock Faber, you know, kind of leading the charge here towards the future?
Well, in the short term, Bill Guerin is going to say, hello, Zeev, welcome to our lineup. Because if you look at what happened on Saturday, they didn't have Jared Spurgeon. They didn't have Jacob Middleton. They had to call up Cameron Crotty from Iowa. So they're playing shorthanded on the blue line. He's going to step right in. He's probably going to, if those players don't play in their next game, he's probably going to play a top four role. I mean, having Brock Faber and Zeev Buium as sort of anchors. Now, we have to see how he establishes himself in the NHL. But from every indication, the way he played internationally at the World Junior for Team USA, the way he's played at Denver, I don't think he's going to be a dynamic offensive performer. I just think, like Faber, he's going to be a solid two-way defenseman. He's got speed. He makes good decisions. You know, these are the type of defensemen that teams build around. And I think, you know, he's going to help them in the short term and in the long term. So it's a positive for Minnesota to have two of these sort of linchpin defenders on their blue line going forward.
Definitely. And speaking of the Wild, a little bit more antics going on over here, but the Wild in their overtime loss to the Vancouver Canucks over the weekend, saw, as I said, some fireworks. Yakov Trenin got into a bit of a scrap with Derek Forbort on Saturday, and then he landed a late shot to Forbort's head while he was on the ground. Obviously, that resulted in an ejection for Trenin, but that wasn't all. When he was being ejected, when he left the penalty box, he went and had some words, I think, for the Canucks bench, and was looking for another fight. And so finally ends up getting off the ice. And after the fact, you know, Quinn Hughes called it a circus act. I think Elias Pettersson said that the late hit on Forbort was one of the worst things he's ever seen. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this? Did you see the play? And do you think that Trenin should have received supplemental discipline beyond just the ejection?
Well, I mean, I did watch the play, not live, but the following day, and I mean, he sewered him. I mean, and I hate when players do that. It's like, you know, there are rules to fighting in this game. Maybe you don't pat each other on the head after the fight, but there's decorum. There, it's not the Marcus of Queensbury rules, but there is a respect of the other party. And Trenin obviously did not read that book because it was sort of a wild sort of fight where they were losing balance each time. I mean, Forbert actually held up from hitting Trenin when Trenin was losing his balance, and then Trenin puts all of his weight down on him as they fall to the ice, and then he throws 2 punches after the fact, and when the player is prone and being held back by the officials. The inconsistent justice of the Department of Player Safety should not surprise anybody. You think that there's a hit that's a nothing thing and it gets 3 games suspension, and then you think there's a hit that should be 10 games and they don't even get a $5,000 fine. I'm surprised that Trenin didn't even get a fine. So if you're surprised that he didn't get suspended, that's every day in the NHL, ladies and gentlemen.
True. Yeah, I covered Yak for a few years here in Nashville when he was with the Predators. He's definitely a physical player. He's a big body. He could be that enforcer and, kind of mix it up. But I will say in my years covering him, I have never seen him truly lose his cool like that, the way that he did against Forbert. That should not at all excuse what he's done. I agree with you. I think that there's certain unwritten rules. If a player's down, if the guy's down, if his head's on the ice, then you leave it at that. But clearly whatever was being said when he was leaving the ice, I don't know who said what on the Canucks bench, but clearly there, emotions running very high there. So it's definitely not the kind of thing that you ever want to see from anyone, and hoping that doesn't become a pattern for a guy like Trenin, who can do a lot of really good things and has never really gotten into that kind of trouble like that, at least not to that extent. All right. Let's talk about Chicago. We already knew that Patrick Maroon was going to be retiring at the end of the season, but his teammate, 3-time Stanley Cup champ Alec Martinez, also announced that he would be retiring on Saturday in the Blackhawks' final home game. So Martinez played 16 seasons in the NHL between the LA Kings, the Golden Knights, the Blackhawks. Famously scored that Stanley Cup winning goal against the Rangers for the Kings in 2014. Now that his career has officially come to an end, Michael, where do you see Alec Martinez and, defenseman of his era? Is he more underrated than you think people should give him credit for?
I don't know if he's underrated. I think he's well respected as sort of that type of solid second pairing defenseman that championship teams need to win. He's a penalty killer. He's a shot blocker. He's a defensive defenseman. He had a couple good offensive years with the Kings, but his offensive stats are nothing to speak of, but he's just a guy you put out there 20 plus minutes in the regular season, in the playoffs, and he does what needs to be done to win. So, he did it with 2 different teams, with the Kings twice, with Vegas, and, finishes out his career with the Blackhawks. I mean, he's never going to be a Hall of Famer, but I think, he's well respected in the league and deserves to be respected because he had a championship career and he was a big part of those championships.
All right. Well, definitely hats off to Alec Martinez on quite the career in the NHL. Pat Maroon as well. One of the interesting stories, most interesting, and I would say most surprising stories of this NHL season, Michael, has been the New York Rangers. They were the President's Trophy winners last season with 55 wins. And now, fast forward to present day, they have been eliminated from playoff contention. They lost to the Hurricanes on Saturday. they have only managed to reach 37 wins this season. Again, that's compared to 55 last year. So just looking at this team as a whole, what do you think has been the biggest difference for the Rangers that it really could account for a drop off of this size? And do you think that this is something that they should be able to easily rebound from and be competitive again next season?
The reason for their decline is internal chaos. I have to say that they were my selection in the preseason to go to the Stanley Cup final. So I have egg on my face with that prediction. But maybe we should have seen the signs of this even going back to the summer when they essentially found an out to trade Barclay Goodrow to San Jose. And then the email from Chris Drury basically putting Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba, two of the leaders of the team, on the trade market. I mean, Drury has really handled this badly. This was a good team. Now, granted, Trouba was starting to slip a little bit, but he still had things to contribute. Goodrow was an extremely valuable player for them in the playoffs last year, and they summarily dump him because, obviously I think they wanted to clear cap space. They traded Ryan Lindgren at the deadline to Colorado, and I think he's played pretty well with the Avalanche, so he had something to contribute. So, and not only that, they traded Capo Caco, they dumped him to Seattle, and he's played well with the Kraken and Filipino and the JT Miller day. I mean, you're talking about 5 players who were big contributors to their run to the conference final last year, and they're all gone. And there are rumors of more players wanting out, like Zibanejad, like Kreider, who's been dealing with injuries. This is chaos, and they have nobody to blame but themselves. There's still a lot of talent on that team, a ton of talent, but they're not as strong as they were at the beginning of the season. And I don't know whether the chaos that's going on there right now, whether other players will want to expose themselves to that chaos by coming in there as a free agent.
Yeah, you mentioned the possibility of other players wanting out. Obviously not as big of a name, but Calvin DeHaan, I think his name came up over the weekend as he was traded from Colorado in that Lindgren trade, but there were reports that he had some comments as he went out to the ice for their final home game, said something about it finally being over, and that sparked a lot of conversation as well. Normally when things like this happen, obviously it doesn't not all the blame falls on one person. But at the end of the day, when you have a season that's been as disappointing as this one has for the Rangers, someone needs to fall on the sword. Do you think that someone is Peter Laviolette? Do you think that he gets fired? If so, are there any candidates that jump out to you that may be the best fit for the Rangers next year?
Yeah, I think Laviolette is likely to be let go because the interpretation out there is that Drury is safe. He should not be, based on everything that we just talked about, but I think he probably is. He has Jim Dolan's ear, so I don't think he's going to be let go. And the DeHaan thing that you mentioned, I think, is sort of symptomatic of that chaos. I mean, I understand his position. He got traded from Colorado to the Rangers. They played him 3 games, and then they didn't play him the rest of the time since the middle of March. And he's a veteran who wants to continue his career, and not playing for a good chunk of the last month of the regular season doesn't send a signal to other teams that you're valuable anymore. So I can understand why he is irked. As for the potential new coach, if Laviolette is fired, I know everybody is thinking Tortorella. He does have a history with Jim Dolan, but I don't know. I think that would be a combustible situation, and I just don't know where this team is, whether he's the right fit. I do know that another name that has been floated out there, which I don't think will go, is David Carl, the head coach at the University of Denver, who's won World Juniors, won national championships, but he can pick and choose where he wants to go. Does he want to expose himself to that chaotic situation? 2 names that I've heard and that I asked somebody who would know more about the Rangers situation than myself, former Rangers head coach Alain Vigneault, who's been around a while, but is still, I think a respected coach. And we know that he can handle New York because he's handled it before. But Jay Pandolfo, the head coach at Boston University, who has connections with Drury because Drury is has a BU history. So those are the names that could be in the mix, but there probably are 4 or 5 more that could be as well.
Yeah, definitely feels like the writing's on the wall there for Peter Laviolette. So we'll see what happens there. Moving on, though, Quinn Hutson, brother of Cole and Lane Hutson, officially signed his ELC with the Edmonton Oilers on Monday. So looking at this, I mean, I just said Cole Hutson's with Washington, Lane Hutson, obviously a Calder Trophy favorite with Montreal this year. Looking at now Quinn signing with the Oilers, do you think the Hutsons are going to be like the next Hughes family or the next Stahls family? Looking at just how successful that they have been, and it is pretty remarkable to have 3 brothers at one time playing in the NHL or with NHL organizations. So where do you think the Hutson brothers are gonna kind of come out comparatively?
Well, I mean, we're spoiled by the Hugheses. All 3 of them are really good players. I mean, Jack, his only issue has been health. Quinn Hughes is one of the best defensemen in the NHL, and Luke Hughes appears to be a really good young player and has a bright future. With the Hutsons, everything I've heard about Cole Hutson is that he'll be a good NHL player, that, he's playing well right now, that, Washington got him as a steal in the second round. And I saw Lane Hutson on Saturday in Toronto. His lateral movement, his speed, his ability, his positioning ability, and his offensive chops are just fantastic. So I think, he's gone from somebody that I thought might have a chance to win the Calder to the favorite to win the Calder. Quinn Hutson, from what I've been told, does not have the speed and skill that his brothers do. Now, he's earned an NHL contract. He may play a game or 2 at the end of the season for the Oilers, but I've been told that, he's probably not going to be a long time NHLer. Maybe, he put up really good numbers at BU, 50 points in 38 games. So he might be able to build himself into a consistent NHLer over time. But right now, I've been told he doesn't have the skill level of his brothers in terms of an NHL career.
All right. Well, one player who has had himself quite a successful NHL career is Nikita Kucherov. We've talked about him quite a bit on the show. He became last week the 4th player in NHL history to have 4 consecutive seasons with 80 assists. The other guys, he's in pretty good company. The other guys who have done that are Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, and Paul Coffey. So not too shabby for Nikita Kucherov. Is it possible that he will go down as a better playmaker, by the end of his career, a better playmaker than guys like McDavid, Marner, McKinnon, when all is said and done? Because obviously we know that Kucherov can score goals, but he's got this distributing and this playmaking ability too. So how do you think that he'll be remembered and kind of leave his legacy as a playmaker in the NHL?
Well, the difference between 2 of the 3 on that list, and yeah, he's a slouch. He's with Orr, Gretzky, and Coffey. My goodness. McKinnon and McDavid are centers. Kucherov and Marner are wingers. And if you compare, so I put McKinnon and McDavid in a separate category because being a center, I think most centers are playmakers. That's part of their toolkit. That's not to say that, Kucherov is an amazing playmaker with, really great vision. And he's had the benefit of playing with guys like Braden Point and Stamkos throughout his career. So he's had somebody as a trigger man on his line to take advantage of his playmaking ability. If you put him side by side with Marner, the difference is that Kucherov has been a playmaker and a difference maker when it counts in the playoffs. He's won Stanley Cups. Marner has not. Marner's going to get to 100 points this year. He's having his best career season. He's probably doing it at the right time to go into free agency. But if you put him alongside Kucherov has done it when it counted in the postseason and has won the ultimate prize twice. So I think he's ahead of Marner, but I think he's behind McKinnon and McDavid.
All right. Well, wrapping up our conversation today, Hockey Canada announced their training camp selections for the U18 World Championships coming up in August. So goaltender Jack, is it Ivankovic? I think we've decided on that pronunciation. Ivankovic of the Brampton Steelheads has been named to the list. He was a backup goaltender at the World Juniors last year to Carter George. It looks like he's going to be maybe the starting goaltender for Canada at this tournament. But just kind of want to get your thoughts on that. He's projected to be one of the top goaltenders in the 2025 draft class, and he's also projected to, be picked in the second round. So what NHL team do you think could benefit the most from drafting Ivankovic this year? Which team needs a goaltending prospect, and do you think will be the most likely to land him?
Well, obviously since he's going to be playing in the under 18s, he's a 17-year-old and he's going into the draft, one of the youngest players and probably the youngest goaltender in the draft. I would probably recommend that whatever team drafts him is a team that already has an established goaltender. Because if it's a team, say, for example, like the LA Kings, who has a veteran goalie in Darcy Kemper, but they're looking for their next savior. Well, that's the last team that you would want to draft Ivankovic, because they would probably want to rush him after his junior career is over with and 1 year in the AHL. I think he would benefit, a team like the Rangers or a team like the St. Louis Blues or the Winnipeg Jets to let him play his 2 years in junior, let him play in the American League for a year or two at least, to develop them. And then when your veteran goaltender is maybe past the age of 30, you have a young goalie who is ready to step in. I mean, now he's not going to be the top goaltender in the draft, more than likely. I consulted with my draft expert, Russ Cohen, who's the co-editor for the Montreal Canadiens. And he said that Joshua Ravensbergen, Prince George, is likely to be the first goalie off the board, probably a first-round pick in the upcoming draft. That's not to say that Ivankovic isn't going to be good, but I think because he's so young, he needs to develop. And I think a slow track, which means a team that has goaltending ahead of him, is probably the best thing for his future.
We often talk about how, defensemen mature at a slower rate than forwards. Goaltenders mature at an even slower rate than that. I think that there's a huge gap from, first, as you said, juniors to the AHL to the NHL. And the last thing that anyone wants to do is rush really any player to the NHL before they're ready, but especially with a goaltender. That is so important to not mess up. And, like you said, you want him to be able to come up in an environment where he is not expected to be the second coming, and he can kind of just develop and mature into his game a little bit, because again, he is so young. All of these guys are so young, but we'll be interested to see what he does for Canada, assuming he makes the team out of their training camp and follow his path along to the draft this year. In the meantime, though, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you, as always, Michael, for the insight, for joining me today. Again, thank you to Stix.com for sponsoring us. We will be back with an all-new episode on Thursday, and we'll see you then.